Good afternoon, everybody. And I've been through a lot the last couple of days with Program 20, just letting you know, with the help of, well, let's just say, there was a silent movie effect for reasons which I cannot determine. So a whole section had to be done over again, and Michael Crow helped me insert that new section pretty much at the beginning of Program 20, so that you are not just looking at me moving my mouth with no sound. The cause of this, I still don't know. I wonder if it's something so simple as having the mute button on, but I don't think so. Anyway, now on Makara, or very shortly, you should find Program 20. And I checked it on YouTube, and it's definitely there. About 3 hours and 15 minutes, 54 seconds, continuing with our work on Shela within the aura. Let me just make a little segue here and hope that this doesn't happen again, because it can waste as much as a day, and one does not have that kind of time to throw away. Every ashram radiates some one major quality, according to the ray of the master at the center. Well, we have to synchronize qualitatively with that particular ray coloring that comes forth from the center. One of the, perhaps the major quality to come forth from Master DK's center is right human relations. In the same way, the hierarchy radiates the quality of the second divine aspect, which is surely the major aspect in our solar system, because it is the soul ray, the ongoing soul ray of our solar logos. Whatever the modifications caused by the changing personality ray, which incidentally, in this particular solar system, is the second ray of love wisdom also. So it's a very second ray major solar system. Just as the all-inclusive ashram, to which we give the name of Shambhala, has the outstanding characteristic of the first aspect, life itself. DK says, this is not a quality, but that of which quality is an emanation. I would say when I think of Shambhala, it's a combination of the first ray, but the second ray is strong as the Lord of the world, is the highest example of the teaching ray on our planet, and as well the very center of the monad, which is life itself, is found in Shambhala. Of course, in a way, it's found everywhere, but the center of the monad is life, and that's what he calls it, that of which quality is an emanation. All things with all of their qualities arose from life itself. And we have to come to the point where we learn that life and being are identical, and we have to identify with life or as life and being. Now, for people at our stage of development, that is an elusive prospect. Sometimes it may dawn upon us and slip away easily. Now, we're still working on the Chela within the Master's aura, and the requirements to really be part of that are very strong. We've been reviewing them, and we don't want to imagine that if we are some kind of point of frequent disturbance on the outer edges of the ashram, that we can be within the Master's aura, setting up or knowing, that is, having the privilege of knowing the method by which we can set up an interview with the Master, to which he must respond. Even for the Chela on the thread, it is possible to evoke the Master's attention, and it doesn't take too much from him to intervene or to send energy or to do something which meets the need which we have, which is always an ashramic need or a group need, or even a need for humanity as a whole. Then, as I've been saying, how much more is this the case when we discuss the requirements for becoming for having the privilege of, in a way, demanding an interview from the Master. He knows he will never be wasting his time with us, because we will only use such a privilege which is imparted to us, and which we will know if we make the grade to have that kind of privilege. We will only request an interview if indeed, in our estimation, the work needs it. I'm thinking about such high and trusted disciples as Roberto Asocioli and obviously an initiate disciple. That's one of the terms that is being used for him, and it's one of the terms that appears in this discussion. That if you were a chela within the aura, you would certainly be an initiated disciple, or as it is called, initiate disciple. And your ideas will long ago have been removed from your own personal self and the stress under which you might be functioning as a personal self. Those things are not no longer of great importance to you. So you can see, when you think about our own state and how concerned we may be if we are an accepted disciple or not, and so forth. Our eyes are still pretty much on the lower personal self. That has to stop, because the wider picture becomes of much greater interest to us, of a preoccupying interest, we might say, much more so than the condition of the little self, which we are enjoined to take care of ourselves. Well, friends, anyway, we are at that point now where hopefully we can leave this trouble behind. I guess one simply must persist with these technical matters and not let them become insuperable obstacles. This is then the 20th of June, and we're on page 755, discussing the chela within the master's aura. The master's aura, which determines the aura of the entire ashram, has three outstanding radiations. As far as the responsiveness of the disciple is concerned. I guess it helps that Alice Bailey was so very proficient in English. Of course, the Tibetan, I think of the masters that we are familiar with from the East, knew English the best, but they worked out a system between themselves, which had eventually a type of English which suited the process very well. And there are just words that you have to pay attention to. And one of them here is the word responsiveness. If he wanted to say something different, he would have. So now we're talking about the master's aura and three outstanding radiations in relation to the disciples' responsiveness. Okay, so what does this aura have? The radiation which comes from the higher levels of the mental plane, or from the lowest aspect of the spiritual triad. And what is that? You know, the monastic permanent atom. The potency of this radiation and the extent of the sphere of influence will be determined by the extent to which the master is spiritually in touch with the mind of God. Now note here how he tells you his specific choice of words. I do not use the word consciously in connection and when dealing with conditions above the egoic levels. It is this particular radiation which evokes a response from the, and note this, embryonic abstract mind of the disciple. I don't think we can assume any other kind of development when the antikarana is being built and is the first kind of contact to which the neophyte responds in the later stages of the probationary path. A direct line of influential approach. Okay, so this is going to be something new. A direct line of influential approach is made between the master and the disciple as follows. So let's get this under our belt here. The first radiation is that which comes from the higher levels of the mental plane or from the lowest aspect of the spiritual triad. And it much depends, you know, on the degree to which the master is spiritually in touch with the mind of God. Now, how is that going to be different from consciously? Maybe not every thing in the mind of God as it manifests on the cosmic physical plane, and perhaps beyond, because the Buddha touched that which was beyond, and which had to do with the cosmic mental plane. So there's something monadic here, spiritually in touch with the mind of God. A monadic indication. And he says he doesn't use the word consciously in this connection. And when dealing with conditions above the egoic level, how can I put this here? The term spiritually. Takes over. From the term consciously. And, you know, frequently he does deal with that when he talks about that which is beyond consciousness as we know it. I guess what would that spiritual in touchness be? A kind of an identificatory being in touch. And certainly even the master does not know all the content of the mind of God, even as it comes down onto the cosmic physical plane, but there is something which synchronizes from the master to this mind of God. And this is a peculiar radiation, and it's going to evoke response from the embryonic abstract mind of the disciple. Well, let's realize in a way that all that most of us have is the embryonic abstract mind. And our building of the Antikarana is beginning to stir our responsiveness to this abstract mind. When you are thinking the great thoughts of the ages, even if you did not evolve them, you may well be within the abstract mind. These are thoughts which cover in generalities the many specifics evidenced in the concrete mind. Now, maybe these generalities have been derived from the intuitive insight of those who can penetrate into the Buddhic plane in that way. And then they have been precipitated by presentation to the higher thinkers of the race. And maybe you are becoming a higher thinker and can appreciate one of the contents of the abstract mind. From a certain perspective, mind always abstracts from experience. But this takes it even further and covers large expanses of thought in which many more particulars are included in the defining abstraction than can be included in the rigid concrete mind. And not only that, but one sees and understands the nature of the categories into which these particulars find their place. So anyway, this is the first kind of contact to which the neophyte responds, and in the later stages of the probationary path, I assume this will mean before accepted discipleship becomes a fact. After the master's acceptance, I wonder, can we really call the stage of the disciple the probationary path? Perhaps the probationary initiate, which comprises the initiations of the threshold, the first and the second. Yes, the antiparana can be built, at least initially, when one is a probationary initiate. And even when one is approaching accepted discipleship on the post first degree section of the probationary path. Okay, so what we're dealing with here is radiations in the master's, or from the master's aura. And these radiations come firstly from the higher levels of the mental plane, subplane 2 and 3, or from the which is that vibratory location upon which the egoic lotus is found, or from, still on the higher mental plane, the lowest aspect of the spiritual triad. Now, so a direct line of influential approach is made between the master and the awakening disciple as follows. And this is important because we do wonder how it is that the master works with the soul and with the mind. Mostly DK says, look, I'm working with your soul. But what he conveyed to the disciples through the letters written down by Alice Bailey may have dealt with all manner of things in the outer world. He told one disciple, look, sometimes you treat the body too well and other times too harshly. That's right down on the physical plane, isn't it? And he told another disciple, you talk too much critically about others in the group. That won't do. He let another disciple know, look, you're overestimating yourself. There is a way that you can understand where you really stand and not your estimation of yourself as a fourth degree initiate. And still another disciple, look, your children are grown up. They don't need your constant anxious supervision as if they were young children. They are grown people. So through Alice Bailey, he said many things which pertain to outer matters. But this doesn't really tell us what he does as he works with the soul of any individual. So there is a direct line of influential approach made by the master, it looks like, who begins this influence with regard to the monastic permanent atom, from which the egoic lotus is, in a sense, built up. Then the knowledge petals of the egoic lotus, and then the lower concrete mind, but held steady in the light, and the throat center, because there is that direct connection between the lower concrete mind and the throat center, even as there is an earlier connection between the sacral center and the lower concrete mind, and then the brain of the disciple upon the physical plane. So this is, it kind of tells us how the master gets through to us, working as he does from the lowest aspect of the spiritual triad, and then with the egoic lotus, and remember the centers, the organizing centers of the personality are found within the atomic triangle, and that atomic triangle is at the lower part of the egoic lotus. So even in a way which must be acknowledged, the concrete mind is within the egoic lotus. And, well, there's a big difference, isn't there, between simply using the mind as the agent of desire and using this lower concrete mind held steady in the light. That would make a very effective physical plane worker. And then, of course, the words spoken by the disciple through the throat center, first ruled by Earth, and then by Saturn, and eventually with a strong admixture of the planet of occult mind, which is Uranus. And then the effective magical words can be pronounced, and all the way through to the brain. So basically, the master is working from the lowest aspect of the spiritual triad right down into and through the brain. This is, all of it, necessarily relative, DK says. But the moment that the disciple establishes this line of approach to the spiritual triad, even in a small measure, he makes his first response to the aura of the master. Now that is an important sentence in terms of timing and process. Think of it. Think of it. We start building the Antakarana, and at first it is a triangular structure, and the earliest part of it involves simply movement, energetic movement from the mental unit to the egoic lotus itself. And there's another type of movement from the egoic lotus to the abstract mind. But DK has given us a method to approach the monastic permanent atom directly. And maybe it's not so far out of our reach as are the Buddhic and Atmic permanent atoms, even to the master. So if we're building the Antakarana, and we feel there is some success in awakening us to the sensitivity of that abstract world, then already we're making our first response to the aura of the master. Now, in this kind of section, that becomes important. But there is a distinction here to be made. The distinction between the aura of the master and the aura of the ashram is that the master's aura is dynamic, filled with the power to move. And the group aura is influential, maybe not so full of this impactful influence, but still more pervasive and does have its influence on those who are approaching. Yet the two together constitute the group aura, the group aura within the ashram. When this initial response is made, it results eventually in the disciple becoming the chela within the aura. So let me bring this important sentence into high relief. The distinction between the aura of the master and notice in the sentence immediately before, we're talking about the line of contacts, which indicates the first response to the aura of the master, not just of the ashram. So going on, the distinction between the aura of the master and the aura of the ashram is that the master's aura is dynamic, dynamos, to move, and to move with power. And maybe I'll just give a little definition there. Move with power. And it sounds like the group aura is more influential, slowly pervading. One can be steeped in it, but one is not so impelled by it. Not so impelled as by the master's aura. Yet the two together constitute the group aura. Now, it's a response and an alignment that we're talking about. And then the sentence, when this initial response is made, it results, again, the word eventually, in the disciple becoming the chela within the aura. So Antakarana building is very important in this succeeding in this next stage of discipleship. There's so many reasons the Tibetan may ask us to do something, and mostly it has to do with, let's see, what is this in here? He doesn't tell us exactly the reasons, not always, that he is asking us to do something. And what we see is this fivefold response right here, the master it seems initiating this, but the disciple having the alignment or recognizing the alignment. Okay. So what are we doing? 3 outstanding radiations coming from the master's aura, which is dynamic. Let's remember that. And I'm not sure why I'm not quite getting this. You should be getting it. There we go. And it's our responsiveness to it and our participation within this radiation from the master. It makes all kinds of things possible, and really, long before the stage that we are studying is actually reached. But here are the incipient conditions. So 3 outstanding radiations, that's what we are studying right now, coming from the master's aura, which determines the aura of the ashram, and they are considered together. The second outstanding radiation, the radiation which comes from the plane of buddhi. Now, this is no longer beginning with the monastic permanent atom, which is the lowest aspect of the spiritual triad and still on the highest subplane of the mental plane, because we're talking about in a way, the master working with the soul or with the egoic lotus of his chela, and we're talking about how effective that can be to go all the way down into the disciple's personality. And it ended, the last one, with the brain consciousness. And this one is the next one of these outstanding radiations from the master's aura. And you know, friends, when we read the master with attentiveness, it inevitably produces a condition in which we are ever more able to respond to that aura. So number 2, the radiation which comes from the plane of buddhi, or from the plane of spiritual intuition. I wonder if there's really any other kind. So this is a radiation from the master. And DK goes on to say, this is an expression of the love nature of the master, and is that which enables him to be in touch with the heart of God. I wonder what we will mean by heart of God. Let's say that God, in this case, is the planetary logos, and that Buddhic expression is occurring on the fourth subplane of the fourth solar or systemic plane. So it is an expression of the love nature of the master. Now, Master DK, a very intellectual master, or at least a very learned master. Somewhere it says this. He is the most learned of all the masters, and by that I assume the masters with whom we are familiar. But his love nature is very highly developed. It might be noted here, says the Tibetan, that these three radiations emanating from a master and enhanced by the similar, though much less powerful, see, they've been synchronized and thus have achieved similarity to the master's vibration. That is, the ashramic vibrations have been synchronized to the vibrations of the master. So they may emanate from a master and be enhanced by those whom the master dynamically impels forward. But even the whole ashram, even of those who are well within the ashram, have a radiation which is much less powerful. Though if I can say it, though influential. The three radiations emanating from a master are picked up by those within the ashram who these three emanations impact. And so the radiations are enhanced. It's not as powerful as the master's dynamic radiation, but it's useful. It's much less powerful. These radiations of the inner members of the ashram are the factors which put the master and the ashram in contact with that which is occultly spoken of as the physical sun, the heart of the sun, and the central spiritual sun. If the master is as the monad to the ashram, then his correspondence here is the central spiritual sun. I suppose that the initiate disciples closest to him would have the correspondence to the heart of the sun, and those who are being influenced and being impelled but are newer have a correspondence to the physical sun. So we're talking about here an enhancement of the master's dynamic radiation by those who are impacted by that radiation, and then they add to it, even though their even combined effect is much less powerful. I guess we begin to understand how powerful is the master's radiation. Probably something we cannot assess at first. Still, to contact even the members, the inner members of the ashram, will be a considerable enhancement of the kind of vibratory livingness that we normally express. More and more, our vibration is being raised by affiliation with the ashram and by synchronization with its timing and its qualities. Okay. So, in fact, the master and the ashram are in contact with these three phases of the sun. We just need to know where we stand and what is our responsibility. And as stated in our horoscope, these correspondences exist with this triple sun system. The sun itself, personal, the rising sign, heart of the sun, and the point opposite the sun, the central spiritual sun. Now, here, in respect to this second of the radiations, the second of three outstanding radiations, this line of approach reaches from the master to the disciple and drawing him finally within the aura, because it's one of those lines, every line contacting the disciple from the master draws that disciple, who is really the initiate disciple, ever closer to the master's aura. So how does it work? The master gets the energy, shall we say, from the Buddhic permanent atom, and it reaches the intuitional vehicle of the advanced disciple. The love petals of the agopas, not the knowledge petals. The astral body in its highest aspect, which has to do with emotional idealism. And finally, the heart center, and not the brain. So three outstanding radiations, two of which we have somewhat taken up. Can the master wield the energy of the intuitional vehicle? Yes. Even though working perhaps directly with the permanent atom of the Buddhic plane is a stage so advanced that the 6th degree is needed, and not only the 5th of mastership. Now we continue with the not only with 5th degree, because in a way, DK tells us somewhere, we have reviewed it, that the Buddhic and Atmic permanent atom represent centers of control which require monadic consciousness or awareness or identification in order to wield or manipulate. I would guess that what the master can do is receive the downflow from those very high levels. Okay, so now the third outstanding radiation. Remember, a master is focused within the spiritual triad, and this is the radiation which comes from the Atmic level, or the will aspect of the spiritual triad. This is the emanatory expression of the capacity of the master, DK tells us, to enter into the council at Shambhala, to register the purpose of God, and to work with the plan, which is the expression of, in any given cycle, of the working out of the divine will. Now, I just want to say a little bit about the master's capacity to enter into the council at Shambhala. This is not true, apparently, for all masters. That which comes forth from the council may be some of it appropriated by the master, but it is generally, DK has told us, the initiates of the 5th degree on the first ray that have the capacity to enter into the province of Shambhala, which generally admits those of the 6th degree. Now, maybe a lot depends here about how the word master is used, because we do know that sometimes a 6th degree or 7th degree Chohan is called a master. Anyway, the purpose of God, as conveyed by the Nirmanakayas and in the possession of the 3 great lords, is to a certain extent vouched safe to the master as he works with the divine plan. So the plan and purpose are the registration of the divine will. I've always felt that somehow this aspect of will is of a still higher caliber than purpose, and involves a purer type of first ray, whereas purpose is involving the first ray and an aspect of the second ray as well. I have debates with my esoteric friends about this. Anyway, this is the 3rd type of outstanding radiation. And it comes from a plane on which the master in general is beginning to function, the atmic plane, and is representing the will aspect of the spiritual triad, which actually comes from that which the monad reveals. And let's see what DK says here. This aspect of the master's radiatory activity is of so high a nature that only the advanced initiate Sheva can register it well, To be an initiate Chela is to have taken the third degree, and to be an advanced initiate Chela seems to suggest degrees beyond the third, the fourth degree, for instance. So will we be able to register the purpose of God, working with the plan, which is the expression in any cycle of the divine will? It's we do not claim, nor would it be ever wise to claim, that we are advanced initiate Chelas. That would be really beyond the pale. Now, as he has done in relation to the two other examples of outstanding radiation coming from the aura of the master, specifically, he gives the line of transmission. So let's see. From the atomic permanent atom, or at least as much of that point of tension that the master can receive, even if he can't quite work on that level yet. The atomic permanent atom, or the focus of spiritual will, at least within the triad, the first aspect of the spiritual triad, the sacrifice petals of the egoic lotus, the etheric body in its highest aspects, considering that the highest two subplanes are considered to be occult, related to Shiva and Vishnu, but that the lower two are third and fourth, more accessible to us, are considered to be Brahmic. So the entire etheric vehicle, in its highest aspects, the head center, and now we presume this to be the Brahmarandra chakra, the great head center, and then connecting from that high point of purpose down to the center at the base of the spine, which is the center of will, which is aroused into activity in response to the vibratory radiation of the other 4 points of transmission. So when we've had these points of transmission, at least 4 of them in each case, the lowest point of reception is aroused into activity. And because of the radiation of the foregoing points through which transmission occurs. So he's given us, look, here are the ways the master reaches the let's say, personality of the initiate. The head centers involved, the higher ethers are involved, the base of the spine. Here's another line of transmission, which takes us into the heart center. And one wonders whether into the heart itself, since the brain as an organ has been involved in the first line of transmission, and in the third line of transmission, the let's see here. Well, I guess the lowest organ, we might say, is the head center. So that's etheric. And then for the Buddhic line of transmission, the lowest line is apparently also etheric. But for the very first line of transmission, the brain as an organ actually is involved. We can understand that the new medical approaches, especially when trying to help those who are on the path, must entail a knowledge of these lines of transmission. I know that chiropractors and osteopaths and those who are involved with acupuncture have some pretty unsuspected knowledge about what is connected with what. And I think it is valuable knowledge and probably will be proven true. But the esotericist, the true esotericist, has even more. So what we've discovered is that there are 3 outstanding radiations coming from the master's aura. 3 outstanding radiations, and they cover one way or another all aspects of the spiritual triad, even if the master does not yet fully function on the level of the highest 2 permanent atoms of the spiritual triad. And they also have anchors in the head center, in the brain, also in the heart center, and in the center at the base of the spine. So that's how these outstanding radiations finally anchor themselves in the personality of the individual. So think about then these 3 lines of transmission from the master, and with respect to our responsiveness to them. Obviously, we are being continually upgraded in our instrumental form, and different parts of our either etheric or actual physical anatomy are being worked on. So we have to play our part in acquiescing or responding to these master-initiated lines of transmission. And we're going through one stage or another. I have a feeling that in building the Antakarana, many of us can begin slightly to respond to that line of transmission initiated at the monastic permanent atom. But frankly, for the average highly mental disciple, such as is found characteristically studying with Master DK, it will be a while before real Buddhic responsiveness becomes possible. But remember, every superior point in a line of transmission, such as we are here speaking of, will be responsible for arousing the next point in that line of transmission. And it would be nice to know whether we are actually responding to the lines of transmission which the Tibetan has set in motion, or the master. You will note, he says, from a study of the above, how abstruse and difficult it is to put into words the nature of the vibratory activity of the master, the radiatory activity. Dynamic, impelling, and sequentially influential. All I can do, in default of your intuitive understanding, so there we are with Master DK again, realistically putting us in our place. All I can do, in default of your intuitive understanding, is to put into technical and academic terms, thereby crystallizing the truth and somewhat distorting it, that which cannot be expressed. So I guess the word is, let us hasten to cross into that next frontier, which involves at least some intuitive Buddhic responsiveness, some type of the higher pure reason, some straight knowledge, as Master M calls it. I think when we do that, we're going to discover to our shock how far away from it we have been when we simply wielded mentally descriptive terms. The mind is more like the menu to these things, and the actual experience is the meal. So you can anticipate much, and eagerly so, when dealing with a menu, but you can't eat it, So let us find a way to move in this kind of folksy analogy here, from the menu to the meal. We've been dealing then with the outstanding threefold radiation of the Master in any ashram. And you can begin to see what a sacrifice it is for them, really, in a way, to return to kindergarten with us and speak in terms which they clearly understand to be far below their level of comprehension. If they speak too high, we just won't get it. And it will be something of a waste of time. The threefold radiation of the Master, as it expresses his planned activity and sphere of influential emanation. Remember, it's impactful, but like the influence of his indrawn ashramic members, it is influential, is that it draws the disciple into his aura. Not in this instance the aura of the ashram, which would be a sufficient and appreciated advancement. Not in this instance the aura of the ashram, but of that which makes the ashramic aura possible. In fact, the life of the Master. So, what is the principle? The Master's radiation, in connection with the three organizing points of the spiritual triad, draws the disciple into his aura. And we can't be drawn in, really, unless we are already the initiate disciple. So let's think about that. Because obviously the master wants very trusted co-workers and ones who are not points of disturbance to which the master or some delegated inner member must be sent to correct. The ashrams have to become more and more powerful and more effective. Now, part of that is that they have to expand their personnel. So I would say most of us are being drawn towards the stage of accepted discipleship. And if we succeed there, into a still more intimate relationship with the master through Chela on the thread. And if we succeed there, into the privileged position of being the Chela within the aura. Now, we've been taught how that gradually comes about. And from the master does come an emanation or an outstanding radiation, which helps in the process. Obviously, if we live the sacrificial life of service, it's going to happen all the faster. One interesting fact might be given, or here be given, Master DK says, the moment when an initiate Chela has intensified his vibration so that it is identical with that of the master and can hold that rate of vibration as his normal quality, he becomes a master. Well, that makes sense. The initiate Chela's vibration has constantly been upgraded through approach to the master's outstanding radiations and through responsiveness to the line of descent by means of which the master reaches the etheric physical plane, or the etheric physical and the dense plane. I don't know that there's any of us can say, well, of course we can't, that we have so intensified our vibration that, for instance, we can hold a vibration which is like Master DK's as our permanent, our normal radiatory quality. For us, it's still very much an approach and withdrawal, an approach and withdrawal, a fluctuation, a coming and a going. In every ashram, there is always, at a given moment, some one disciple who is being trained to take the master's place eventually, thereby releasing him for higher and important work, more important work. Well, we get the idea of who Master DK was in relation to Master KH. As you know, DK says, I was the senior disciple of Master KH. And when I became a master, and I believe that was around the year 1875, I released him for higher work, and my place in his group was taken by another disciple on the second ray. So 2 disciples are needed to bring about the complete liberation of a master from all ashramic work. And I was the first of the 2 chosen to do this. He's being, of course, cautious here because he cannot give away too much. The other, in a sense, I suppose under the supervision of Master DK, but in Master KH's ashram, the other has not yet made the grade. And you know, that you wonder if Alice Bailey would be involved in this process. I always I've read this many times, and I always wonder who that other disciple is, because just think of the amount of learning that would be required of such an initiate disciple to reasonably replace what Master DK was doing as he moves up to replace what Master KH was doing, perhaps before Master KH achieved Chohanship. So the other one has not yet made the grade, and it takes 2 disciples are needed. we're just talking about, getting into the process. We're talking about being members of such an ashram. And here are these high matters of between various masters and, I would say, becoming Chohans, about how that progression will occur. But no matter how it does occur, we know the occurrence will be adequate to the necessity of imparting the correct training and teaching. When this process of identification takes place, a moving forward of every member in the entire ashram becomes possible, even though it seldom happens. Well, the ashram is to be marked by a condition of stability, and it cannot be full of constant change, just the way our soul ray does not change constantly. Once, perhaps, moving from 4, 5, 6, or 7 to 1, 2, or 3, and maybe for some, 2 times a change, as in, for example, moving from the 6th ray soul to the 4th ray soul to the 2nd ray soul. Symbolically speaking, it might be described as a potent, expanding impulse which widens the circle of the ashram so that higher levels can be touched and lower levels of influence can be included. And we perhaps can expect that such a movement will be coming up before long. And I might just say this: what happens when Lord Maitreya moves on towards the end of the age of Aquarius? Well, something similar has to happen, because it will be Master KH who takes the place of the world teacher in the age of Aquarius, Capricorn really, and then that will affect the Tibetan, who probably will become the director of the entire major second ray ashram, and then who knows who may be up and coming. I sometimes think that when DK talks about the other person not being quite ready, he could be referencing Alice Bailey. But when I think about it, I'm not quite sure that the kind of work, extremely detailed, intricate work, filled with all the many particulars of the esoteric science, is the right kind of work for Alice Bailey. She seems to be on a different line. But there's no question that she is very high in Master K.H.'s ashram. Going on. Someday, it will be all realized hierarchy, which it certainly isn't yet. For the hierarchy is but the state of consciousness with the life aspect, Shambhala, at the center. Sorry, get a little short of breath here. With the state of consciousness, let's say in that state of consciousness, which is hierarchy, and it will include Shambhala and humanity, the life aspect is at the center, Shambhala, and the circle of humanity constituting the emanating factor, the radiatory influence or aura, whereby other kingdoms in nature are evoked into responsive activity. So we, humanity, are the macrocosm for the lower kingdoms, and we will come into that realization. Someday it will be all realized hierarchy. And Shambhala really also is part of that hierarchy, considering the term in a larger sense. And we have a triple triangle diagram somewhere here, which shows the final state of the interaction of Shambhala hierarchy and humanity, and it is a triangle with arrows pointing in both directions between each of the points of the triangle. So basically you've got 6 arrows going, 3 pointing in one direction as if downward, 3 pointing in another direction as if upward. I felt the right thing to do, since I've talked about it so often, would be to show the three triangles in their various states of development, past, present, and future. In the past, Shambhala reaching to hierarchy, but not to humanity. Hierarchy reaching to humanity, but not so much to Shambhala. And humanity, interestingly enough, reaching upward toward Shambhala. The great Shambhala impacts have indeed made a difference in the rate of progress of humanity. Then the present triangle, the hierarchy begins to reach toward Shambhala, but is not complete in doing so. Humanity, and here we are, is definitely reaching to a hierarchy, but not, strangely, as in former days, toward Shambhala, though Shambhala, with its impacts, is reaching towards humanity and making a very big difference. Real, true Shambhala impacts are rare, but they have been accelerating in frequency. And finally, here is that kind of, well, it's not really 6 arrows so much as it is 3 arrows with each one with 2 directions. Shambhala reaches to hierarchy, and hierarchy to Shambhala, more complete. Humanity reaches to hierarchy, and hierarchy infuses humanity. And this Shambhala contact between humanity and Shambhala, the Shambhala impacts are frequent, very effective, and humanity begins to develop the will. So, okay. Keep that particular triangle in mind. I can't right now tell you where in the books it is because I failed to put down the particular book of reference. I suspect it is the rays and the initiations. But maybe we can feel that we are in this second process, at least as regards our human kingdom, and we can anticipate that towards which we are moving in the age of Aquarius and of Capricorn. Okay. Now, we've been dealing with the 3 outstanding radiations of the Master's aura, and how from being within the aura, that high initiate disciple eventually can so intensify his vibration that it's identical with the Master. I think that happens particularly in the stage of the blending of the lights, which occurs during the very little discussed 7th stage of discipleship. And hierarchy never really leaves itself uncovered. They are always preparing centuries and centuries ahead for eventualities. So even now, perhaps some well over 2,000 years ahead, we are told about Master KH's assuming the role which Lord Maitreya now occupies as the world teacher. And we can see how the factor of synthesis is at work, all bringing these different areas of expression into a realized oneness. And I'll make a segue that someday it will be all realized hierarchy. Shambhala hierarchy, humanity, it will be one continuity. For the hierarchy is but a state of consciousness. Now, can we realize that? The hierarchy is but a state of consciousness. So it's not a question of where you are or who you're exchanging energy with and so forth. It is a state of realization of consciousness with the life aspect, Shambhala, at the center. And notice how here he is basically saying hierarchy, which is the ashram of Sanat Kumara, in a very significant way, has Shambhala at its very center. And also the circle of humanity constituting the emanating factor, the radiatory influence, or the aura, whereby the other kingdoms in nature are evoked into responsive activity. And humanity is, we know, the macrocosm to these lower kingdoms in nature. The higher kingdoms don't need to be evoked into responsive activity by humanity. The lower kingdoms, for which humanity is the macrocosm. Now, this is exactly the place where suddenly I noticed, or it was called to my attention, that while I was speaking the right words and looking at them, it just so happened that you weren't seeing them, which, of course, is unfortunate because it stands in the way of assimilation. So, I'll go on not knowing whether what I said before was better or worse, more illuminating or less, but I'm hoping that it's equally illuminating. Oh my, haste makes waste, so that when you're eager to get this across, you might just skip over a very important step. And there's an idea too, that in the process of climbing the ladder of life, you just don't want to Well, you can't skip any steps, or if you think you are skipping steps and jumping and going rapidly, you may awaken to the dismal fact that those very steps are what you needed all along. So I struggle on and hoping to receive more light on these matters, and hoping that whatever light I receive, I can, in my own way, convey it to you, and that you can benefit from it. This is a broad and general picture of this stage of discipleship, Chela within the aura, as I have attempted to convey its individual implications and its more esoteric group results. Remember, we've been talking about how the master descends or sends energy forth in relation to the three major points or permanent atoms within the spiritual triad. Even though a master per se, who is not on the first ray, and maybe let's just say a master who is not a Chohan, cannot really reach the first subplane of either the Buddhic subplane of the Buddhic plane or the Atmic subplane of the Atmic plane. He can receive, but he cannot, it seems, wield from there unless he is a Chohan. Well, all of these things we will learn in a factual and more scientific manner. So Chela within the aura, and more I may not say, he says. Well, right away we hear the idea of permission. He may not. It's not that he cannot. He could, perhaps, but he may not. So let's just say, and I wrote it before, that all hierarchical transmission is governed by permission from higher sources than the one seeking permission or seeking to transmit. Now here he says, he doesn't use the word may, but he uses the word can, nor can I enlarge upon the process whereby a Chela within the aura can, and this is interesting, can at will. And for meeting some urgent need, a need even greater than that which might be the reason behind a Chela on the thread asking for the attention of the master. So he can at will, and for the meeting of some urgent need, confer with the master in the ashram. Well, that is setting up an interview, basically, and by this time, we're dealing with the trusted initiate disciple who has the discrimination to know the difference between the intensities of need and whether something that is simply personal or maybe just concerns some group issues that can be worked out, whether those things are the issue for him, or whether there is really some issue that concerns the wider service and the service to humanity. But we're not at that point yet, where we can set up at will an interview. Now, there may be an interview in the stage of accepted discipleship, but it is originated from the point of view of the master, and it will carry, to distinguish it from other dreams and so forth, a certain, in the words of Carl Jung, a certain numinosity, which is a peculiar kind of radiance and felt significance. Well, Tibetan says, one thing I can tell you, one thing only can I tell you. Okay. We see how well the secrets are guarded. The secrets of initiation are guarded. In Masonry, there have been so many divulgences, we might say. And many of the rituals have been stolen even and printed. But then again, we're dealing there with an outer reflection of inner events and not with the inner events themselves. The master will always have 3 disciples who are the closest cooperators with him and intermediaries. Earlier, we learned that there's always one disciple, advanced disciple, who is waiting to take the master's place when the master moves on to take the place of a superior. KH will move on to take the place of Lord Maitreya in the age of Capricorn. My guess is that Master DK will become the ruler, lord, supervisor, as KH is now, of the major second ray ashram, and that there will be someone in Master DK's intimate circle who will be in a position to undertake whatever he is doing, whether it is the second or third sub ashram in the major second ray ashram. He does say at some point that he has 5 masters working in his ashram. So if he were in a way the head of the second ray sub ashram, it would be inclusive of 5 other masters, sub 3, sub 4, sub 5, sub 6, sub 7. At the same time, in my mind at least, there's no question but that Master DK has a lot of the third ray of a acute mentality, the acute energy of divine mental perception. So, and I believe very much that, like the Buddha, he has an aspect of his monadic setup, which is on the third ray. Whether that is the logoic, well, let's call it the monadic subplane, or the logoic. Something on the second ray and third ray is up there for him, just the way I believe it is so for the Buddha. But all of these technicalities, it might be nice to know, but at the same time, we cannot ascertain the knowing at this point. Now, in addition to the one who is waiting in the wings, so to speak, and is being trained, and I often wonder, can it be Alice Bailey? I don't know. So there was another call, and fate has set me up so that I can see if I can not repeat the mistake that I made earlier today, which basically invalidated about 36 or 37 minutes of discussion. So always waiting in the wings is someone to take one's place. And we're told the Buddha can put in 3 simultaneous independent appearances because, just loosely, he is a third-ray monad. But there's more to it. On one level, he may be a third-ray monad. We're told the seeds of the previous solar system, the previous major solar system, ripened in him. So it seems that he was in the previous major solar system and on the moon chain, which is not usually the case to be in both. And then I believe during Atlantis was transported into our particular planetary chain. Well, with Master Decay, I believe he was part of the moon chain humanity, but I am uncertain and think, in fact, on the basis of some of the things that he said, that he was not an entity in the previous major solar system. But I think he has rays similar to the Buddha. So, okay, not only is there someone waiting in the wings, but there's more. Every master always has 3 disciples who are closest cooperators. The Christ did, probably Peter and John, the beloved disciple, and who knows about Mary Magdalene, who was a very philosophically astute disciple, and the church, for their own reasons, thought to tarnish her reputation, I do believe, by associating her with prostitution, and it certainly did a big number on women's affiliation with the church during the past 2,000 or so years. It was one of those decisions which definitely kept the message of the Christ from being properly expressed. I do appear to be sharing here the right text. As I say, it's probably not going to last 37 minutes, probably a bit more, but I can't worry about that. Anyway, you'll get the same material more or less. So the question about the three disciples, in the case of the Christ, they were human beings, even as he was, in a sense, a human being. When he became a Chohan, then the statement applied to him, they are no longer men as are the masters. Okay. But the question remains, are the three surrounding the central point of the triangle of the same, maybe I can call it species, as the one in the center, or are they lower? Or are they higher? All three will do. Now, from a certain point of view, the Christ is the point at the center of a triangle consisting of higher beings. The avatar of synthesis, the spirit of peace, and even the Buddha has, in a way, more temporal experience than the Christ, because it appears that if the seeds of the previous solar system ripened in him, then maybe he was part of that solar system. We know he was part of the moon chain and did move to the earth chain. So in this particular case, the point within the triangle would have lesser status than the surrounding points. But when Christ chose his ashram, I guess we can call it that, a replica of what ashrams really do, he chose human beings like himself because he was still a human being. It is also possible to choose those of a different stratum of development, such as, let's say, our solar logos may have three planetary logoi who are most intimate to him, surrounding him. They will be of lesser developmental caliber than the solar logos. Okay. They will be, for instance, like Neptune, maybe Uranus, maybe Saturn, the three synthesizing planets, which are of lesser degree of development than the solar logos. And our local cosmic logos, who is the Lord of the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one, may also be choosing 3 solar logoi, of which our sun, not yet quite sacred in that respect, is not one, but Sirius might well be one, or maybe Vega, or, there are several highly developed solar logoi in our vicinity, proximity, for which the cosmic logos might be the point at the center. And then when it comes to the supercosmic logoi, let's say the one about whom naught may be said, he may choose 3 lessers, each one of which is a constellational lord, like the Great Bear, or Orion, or the Syrian system, perhaps. They would be less than he, and yet they would be the closest cooperators on their own level with him. So exactly which way it's going to work out, we don't know. Whether the 3 will be of the same species, men choose men, lower species, A solar logos chooses planetary logoi. A cosmic logos chooses solar logoi, or greater than. The one in the center needs the protection of the three around him. In the case of the Christ, the avatar of synthesis, the spirit of peace, far more in advance than the Christ, and even the Buddha, who has had more, a longer duration as a specifiable entity. I hope I'm being clear in what I'm saying. But the point within the triangle is an archetypal figure, and we have to decide about same, higher, or lower when we look at the point within the triangle and the three surrounding points. So these closest cooperators, who are they in the case of DK? Well, did I say that I wonder about Alice Bailey? I can see her being that in relation to KH, but Master DK's level of cognitive scientific detail doesn't seem to be quite on the same wavelength as Alice Bailey. So the question is, who are the three around him, with the possibility, strong possibility, that around KH per se is the Tibetan, Master DK, and also Alice Bailey and one other. Well, these are speculations, and about them we cannot be certain. Anyway, these three closest cooperators have emerged, quote, into his consciousness, the Master's consciousness, as it is called, in response to the radiatory activity of his threefold spiritual nature. Now, we have been talking about in all of this the outstanding radiation of the Master's aura per se. And somehow the Master knows who are the three who have emerged in response to the radiation of his aura. Wonder if I have that. There it is. Three outstanding radiations from the aura of the Master. Okay. They have emerged. And there's no use to try to be ambitious about it and say, okay, look, I want to be one of them. The ray that is carried will determine, and the ray and the degree of development of the ray will determine who it is that emerges. Okay. Now, where were we? Yes, here. They have emerged into his consciousness. And apparently he needs three to support him. It's another example of the point within the triangle. Maybe we know something about a mixture of Master KH's and Master DK's ashram, and not thoroughly about either one of them. Now, one day when we are a master, we will be, there will be one disciple, probably one of the three, who will be ready to take our place when we take the place of our superior. And there will be three around us who are suitable for being the closest cooperators and intermediaries. This is all about ashramic affairs. And I think most of us have a long way to go before we know with any kind of certainty that we are even under the master's eye as an accepted disciple. They do have a function. They work very closely with the master, and they watch over the other disciples in the group. The master cannot do everything, and he needs support according to the need of these ashramic members, their ray, and their point of development. So if for any reason you feel you have advanced to the point where the master has his eye on you, probably three others also have their eye on you, according to your need, your ray, and your point of development. These are interior, silent affairs, and we may go on a long time before knowing that they are taking place. But, we have to mind our own business in a way. If we're in the 3rd or 4th grade or whatever, in a grade school, we might be slightly interested in what's going on in 7th or 8th grade, but we're not going to follow it as closely as the 7th or 8th graders. You will remember, says the Tibetan, in this connection, how even the Christ had 3 disciples who were closer to him than the other 9. Maybe, more synchronized with his quality and synchronized with his timing. He built his church upon Peter, the rock. It looks like one disciple, John the Beloved, dictated to by Paul, who is supposed to be substituted for Judas Iscariot. Was it the island of Patmos where John took down the book of Revelation as dictated by Paul? In any case, he seemed to escape the sort of horrible fate of so many of the disciples of whom the Christ said, "They will persecute you for my sake." So The other 9 were there. They were embraced in the ashram, but not as close as maybe as I suggested, Peter, John the Beloved, and what? Can Mary Magdalene be in there? Perhaps. Or was it Paul? Who by that time had changed his identification from Saul to Paul, awakening, as it were, on the road to Damascus, when he was set forth on a mission to persecute those Jews who had, in a sense, become followers of the Christ. Now, this is important. See, these are the stable points. There may be many other symbolic points when looking at ashramic membership, but the 3, and maybe the 9, but certainly the 3, are an archetypal structure within an ashram, and they do surround the head of the ashram. In the biblical story, An End to Christ, you have, among other things, conveyed a picture of an ashram as technically constituted and of hierarchy as it essentially exists. Maybe not in every detail, but here are the 3 and the 9 and the 70 and the 500, all in a way symbolic of how an ashram is brought together and is sustained, with the 3 surrounding the master being the most stable of all of the archetypal structures. But in the case of the ashram of the Christ, and I can imagine the Master Jesus looking on when the Christ was using that body, his body, looking on and seeing how the Christ was conducting these ashramic affairs. There were the 3 disciples. That's the most stable structure. Beloved and close. I'm not sure how much he talks about who they were and why they were beloved, except for the statement of John the Beloved. Then the 9 who completed the inner ashram. Will it always have to be 12-fold, and will 9 always be added to the 3? I'm not sure about that. But the 3 are there. Next came the 70, who were symbolic of the ashram as a whole, not just the ones very close to the teacher who were basically the apostles, but everybody. So when you're looking at the present ashram, which is the group of the Lord of the world, there are quite a few members, and 70 is a number that indicates their numerosity. What is the story that every time an ashram reaches the number 63, a new ashram has to be formed? I think he does deal with that. It cannot be too big, and it is ruled by number. So these are symbols. And finally, the 500, typifying those what were interested. They are on the probationary path, and they are under the supervision by the master, but not at this point by the 3, the 9, and the 70, until the time comes to admit them to the path of accepted discipleship. And that would be the 500 needing to be admitted to the path of accepted discipleship. So we get the idea that there are significant numbers here, but their symbolism is what is important. And we get the idea of how an ashram is put together, and those on the probationary path, or a number of different levels of that path, are still on the probationary path before they have been brought in as accepted disciples. And now he goes on and discusses a still greater ashram. In the greatest ashram of all, at least on our particular planetary scheme, Sanat Kumara has the same sequence of relationships, even if not the same numbers, among the great beings who form his group of active workers. It's the sequence of relationships and not numbers, which always will be found inviolate. No, something more symbolic than that is meant. And who are some of these great beings? Well, we've studied the rays and the initiations, who are the ones in his council. But certainly in terms of his ashram, the 3 Buddhas of activity surround him. And when we come to the hierarchy itself, at least partially directed by the Christ, the 3 great lords are there, as of the same species of the Christ, but of lesser attainment. So the sequence is there. Those who are beloved and very close, those who are part of the inner group, just a little more distant than the close and beloved, and then those who form the larger ashram, because after all, we're dealing with a hierarchy, which has many participants, even if it is somehow limited altogether to the number 63. That has to be researched more fully. And then the many disciples and initiates of probation, who perhaps are not entirely within the great ashram, but they are represented by this sequence of relationships. And all those other beings who come into Shambhala, well, they are kind of visitors, we might say, representatives from different planets and even stars. So they're not quite in the same category as that working group that we call the hierarchy, which is the ashram of Sanat Kumara. Bear in mind, however, that these figures are symbolic, and that not necessarily factual. And here's why. Here's the point. The number of disciples in an ashram varies constantly. But the sequence of relationships seems to hold. The closest, those who are within the inner circle, the members of the wider ashram, and then the interested ones who are still being tested out before being received. But always, there are three who are responsible to the master for all ashramic activity. That's a really important point. Always there are three. And I want to emphasize that word, always. The master needs the support of the three. And we may find that even in the formation of our external groups, the support of three is very helpful. They are in his closest counsels, and they carry out his plans, and they supervise the membership according to the need and the ray. And one other activity, according to the point of development of those who are in the master's ashram. Every member has different needs, and these are such highly developed points of tension, if I can call an entity that they know how to supervise and assist the master, who is very busy with other things, with these great outstanding radiations. Well, maybe we're hearing about all this for the first time. I suspect that is the case for many of us. But that doesn't mean that what we're hearing about is poorly organized or not adequate to the task. It is highly organized in its process and very adequate to the task of helping the ashramic members advance. Always three. And then the closing remark is that the chain of hierarchy is great and immutable. The relationships established, the archetypal levels are immutable, even if varying somewhat in number, and the sequences unalterable. We can't get caught in secondary affairs. The secondary affairs might be like, well, exactly how many are here or there? That's all in flux, and that's not the important thing. It's the chain of connectedness. And we have been given that in the way that the master works with the different points of the spiritual triad, transmitting what he receives from them. The monastic permanent atom, and then receiving from the Buddhic permanent atom, and receiving from the Atmic permanent atom. I guess it all seems like another language somehow. It seems we're dealing with things that realistically are just so far behind, rather ahead of the personality focused millions. DK says it will be a long time before they really are ready for any kind of occultism, especially the spiritual occultism. But at the same time, we can make a difference in their receptivity to these matters. And it's probably true that as members of the new group of world servers, the sentence applies by the Christ, they will persecute you for my sake. So maybe that's something that we have to get prepared for. Well, this has taken us from the unfortunate, always something's missing, you know. The other day it was my voice, although you saw me speaking the silent movie, that was missing. And today what was missing was the text, which was not broadcast to you. And it looks like now that it is going to be broadcast to you, and Michael Crow will just add it on from the point where I received that telephone call. Now, so amazing. You get tested, and here came a similar call, and this time, okay, I'm alert to the mistake that might be made, and I just hope and hope that I did not make that mistake or any other particular mistake. This will be part of finishing the 6 Stages of Discipleship video commentary, program 21, and today so far is still the here in the north, 20th of June, and the year 2021. So it's taken us here to page 758. And then I would be wrong, because now there will be no possibility, it's quite late. So I'll just put down XX for when we'll take up again SXSDVC, 6 Stages of Discipleship, video commentary. Hopefully it will be tomorrow, and it looks like it will be from 7:58 to right there, 7:64. 5 or 6 pages. And if it's a very long program, I'll get it all in. But otherwise, it will probably be divided into 2 or 3 programs. I hope we're really getting something out of this about what discipleship is and how we prepare for it and how we receive the flow from the Master. And what are the structural elements, archetypal structural elements of the ashram, whether or not all the numbers are precisely the same. So we will be continuing with program number 22. And I am grateful for your presence, and Tuya and I wish you love and many blessings and deep study and deep meditation, and the way to apply what you can apply. And that is the same wish that comes forth from the entire communications team. We're doing our best to, well, it's a bit impossible to break it all down so that we can receive from Master DK all that he has written. It is so detailed, so clear at the same time. And only by repeated poring over what has been imparted to us will we come anywhere close to being aware of it and to assimilate it. So we still have a bit more concerning the chela within the Master's aura. And we know that a deep attitude of service to humanity as the most important thing is what is required. And the eyes are taken off the little personal self, and there is decentralization. And as a result, one may qualify for the privilege of participating within the Master's aura ever more closely. So friends, that's it. And this will be added on as an edit. from the place where you had the privilege of seeing only my Zoom number. Now we'll do better. See you soon. Bye-bye.